Hi, everyone. It's Orit Esther Ryder. Once again, we're here in OrTalk. OrTalk is our podcast interview live series with various different professionals and confidants and leading influencers in the Torah world, in the Jewish world. And our first part one with Shoshi has been absolutely amazing. And we both have been receiving a tremendous amount of response and positive feedback from our first interview. Her words deeply resonated with so many of us, and there were such powerful, necessary interactions and insights and wisdom that we learned from her. And we're back. We're back here, Be'ezrat Hashem, God willing. So once again, Rebbetzin Shoshi Nissenbaum, Goldstein, right? I'm sorry. Rebbetzin Shoshi Nissenbaum Goldstein is a To'enet Rabbanit and a mediator. She brings both halachic expertise and deep compassion to her work to help individuals know how to navigate through challenges in marriage. And like I said, she brings a tremendous amount of insight and wisdom, and really helps us understand. And that's one of the things that we're going to kind of jump into. So welcome, Shashi, to the podcast once again. I'm going to start off right away because I feel like this is a nikuda and a point of reference that we need to recognize and understand. How do we know, and this is one of the things where I feel like would give a great boost for all of us, how do we know how to navigate between Emuna and passivity, and to know how do you help your clients distinguish between having faith and taking action and understanding that, like, it's no longer taking the back seat now. There's something that needs to be done to help in our avodas Hashem and help us understand that it's, yeah, like I said, it's time to take action. So welcome.
It's a great question, and it's a question that covers just about every aspect of our lives, right? Not just marriage and divorce. It's about dating, finding a partner. It includes any business practice, how much to work hard, how much to be an entrepreneur, and how much to let go and let God. And I think the best mashal that I use to be able to distinguish when am I being passive and maybe even lazy, and using Emuna as an excuse to exonerate myself from action that Hashem requires, is imagine that a person is in a burning building, right? So they have a choice, right? They need to jump from a high, they're on the fifth floor. They need to jump, or not the fifth floor. Let's make it the third floor, right? They need to jump, and they're going to break some bones, possibly. They're going to even suffer a severe injury, possibly. The other choice is staying in that burning building and waiting for God to come down himself and take you out. So that happened once, right? In Mitzrayim, Hashem literally did come and lo ayedei malach v'lo ayedei saraf. It was really straight HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And now in our gullus, HaKadosh Baruch Hu also does take us out himself, but he takes us out through us, which means that he empowers us and he gives us the ability to make a choice, to be able to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to take the damage. I'm going to break those bones. I'm going to be in a lot of pain, but I am going to jump. And, we could think about the same thing with the splitting of the sea when Klal Yisrael jumped into the Yam Suf, right? They said, okay, we have the mitzvah behind us. We are going to jump, right? So I think when most of my clients are in that place of the burning, right? They're in a home which is literally burning. Okay, I think the mashal is not just a mashal. It really is what's happening. The house is on fire. So the question is, what am I going to do? Am I going to stay and be burned with it? Am I going to go down with the ship? Or am I going to go out? And imagine a mother, and this is what people who decide to get divorced often have to do, right? Imagine a mother with children in a burning building, or a father with children in a burning home, and they have to throw their children out the window, right? And they know their children are going to get really hurt. But what's the other choice, right? So, we have different reactions when we're faced with a crisis, right? Flight, fight, freeze, okay? Um, and those are our choices, the bottom line. So Hashem has given us options, just like a person, Rahman litzlan, who has a horrible disease, could say, you know what, I don't have koach for this. I'm just going to let Hashem heal me. And we know that that's not how we operate, right? That's not how a Kodesh Baruch Hu wants us to operate. That's not a mitzvah to operate like that. It is a mitzvah v'nishmartem ma'od l'nafshosechem, to watch out.
Right.
So when that house is burning, you got to jump, right?
Right.
And you have to have faith that the fireman will catch you, or that trampoline. It goes against every fiber in one's being to jump out of a burning building. Goes
Right.
against every fiber in our being. We're not programmed for that.
Right. I feel
But
like this point is so important. It's so important because so many of us don't know the difference between holding on with Emuna versus just enduring lifelessness in silence because, that's the semen of Emuna. I have to work on my Emuna. I've got to do more. Maybe I could do more. Maybe I could take another class. Maybe I need to go for help. Maybe it's not the other person. And that's why I feel your role, your advocacy role is so crucial so that women and men know that they're not trapped, that they have, first of all, who to take advice from. And also that you're here to also guide us with the Torah's vision of what marriage really needs to look like, to be living alive, right? Forget the joy for a moment, but to be living alive, to live a life of sacredness, not stagnant, not suffering. And I feel like that idea of misirut nefesh, right? Self-sacrifice in marriage, people look at it as like, okay, that's my mesirut nefesh, right?
right.
But
Well,
when it maybe
we touched
explain
upon
that,
that.
when it becomes unhealthy sacrifice, I feel like we need to hear that.
So we touched upon that a little bit last time, where we spoke about the very famous Gemara. Amazing how this Gemara became so famous when people want to use it and weaponize it and take it out of context. And that is the Gemara from Maseches Gittin, Daf Tzadik Amud Beis, where Rabbi Elazar says, right, Kol megarish es ishto harishona, afilu mizbeach morid alav dmaot. What does that mean? Rabbi Elazar said, whoever divorces his first wife, even the altar sheds tears over him. And then he quotes a pasuk from Malachi, actually two pasukim from Malachi. From Malachi Perek Beis, Yud Gimel. And this, by the way, this discussion is coming in the context of when is it mutter, when is it permissible for a man to divorce his first wife, right? So within this context, all of a sudden Rabbi Eliezer pops up and says this, and then he brings two psukim to support his opinion from Malachi. The first pasuk says, "Ksot dim'a es mizbeach nishei." I'm sorry, I'm reading the Rashi already. He quotes a pasuk, and in the pasuk it describes how the women of Klal Yisrael are crying by the mizbeach because their husbands divorced them. And why did their husbands divorce them? Their husbands divorced them for no valid halachic reason, because they had an affair with other women and they found other women who they found more favorable than their wives, or for some other reason that was inconsequential, right? It wasn't a real reason that why they would divorce their wives. So and that's very interesting, right? It's very interesting that these psukim are quoted and used and weaponized and even used to keep men and women in marriages which are burning houses, which they are very slowly dying in the marriage. So we don't have time, and it's beyond the scope to get into all the different halachic reasonings, right? Of
Right.
what is considered a valid divorce in halacha. But I want to, and that's something that it's very individual, right? I mean, there's an opinion that a woman can demand a divorce from her husband because he has a reach ra b'piv. He has a bad smell in his mouth, and vice versa, right? The same thing. So, there's been many expansions on that. If you can demand a divorce because your spouse has a bad breath, right? And I mean like severe bad breath, right? Then of course you could demand if the person is abusive in any way. Then we could say, what is abuse, right? What is the Torah's guidelines of abuse? So the halacha is very clear. The Rambam is very clear. The Rambam takes a very strict stance on this, that there are certain obligations that a man has to a woman, and there are certain obligations that a woman has to a man. Basic obligations, 3 basic obligations that a man has to a woman. And if those aren't done, she can demand a divorce. And according to the Rambam, and we do not paskin according to the Rambam, right? But this is one of the only times the Shulchan Aruch doesn't paskin according to the Rambam, that the Rambam says if those 3 basic things are not met, we'll beat him. We'll beat him until he gives the get. If he doesn't if he doesn't provide for her financially, if they're not having relations at the minimum times which the Torah has told us they have to, and if he's not giving her proper housing, okay, and clothing. So those are pretty basic things that, according to the Torah, a man is supposed to provide for a woman. And there are 22 things that a woman is supposed to provide for a man, right? For her husband. And I think that the bottom line, and it's very interesting, and we can get way off topic today about how different our society has evolved into what we expect from a husband and what we expect from a wife. And I think that a lot of the divorce that we're seeing today is because there are not clearly defined roles. We have been very, very influenced, including myself, right, by feminist movements, by libertarians, equality, egalitarian, all of those concepts which have a deep root in Kabbalah and in the bringing of Mashiach and the Yemos HaMashiach, the Ikvus of the Mashiach, the days leading up to Mashiach and the days of Mashiach. But in a nutshell, we don't have defined roles anymore. So, and this goes back to me getting on my bagwagon, prenup. You got to discuss this first. You got to discuss this. What does it mean? What is your job going to be in this marriage, right? Are you going to be, Mr.? Are you going to be the provider? If you're going to be learning in Kolo, what does that mean in terms of the household finances? What does that mean in terms of forever? Right? What does it mean in terms of the fact that a chassan stands under the chuppah and gives a kala a ksuba that says in it very clearly, and ana okir ve'eflach, I will respect you and I will take care of you financially, right? I will
So
support
many
you.
do not realize that is not something that, there's a lot of women who say that we don't know. Well, we know that ketubah is supposed to protect us, and we're not getting that protection.
Well, if you don't know what it means and he doesn't know what it means and you've never had a conversation about it, well, you're setting yourself up to rely on the prenup of the government, right? Which is doesn't protect anybody. Certainly
Right.
not women, doesn't protect men, doesn't protect anybody.
Wow.
So whenever I'm at a wedding, and last week I had a very, very unique week where I was at 2 weddings and only 1 get, right? Usually I'm at a few getting and once in a while go to a wedding. So I'm at the wedding and I always cry. I always cry by chuppahs. I always cry by getting, right? By both of them. I'm actually, believe it or not, a very, very sensitive person. And it's hard for me to see a get, even though I see them almost once a week. It's hard for me to see it. It's painful, right? It hurts me. And the opposite at a wedding, I think it's the most beautiful thing that 2 souls have found each other and joining, and I daven a lot under chuppah for the couple. But then I hear when they read the ksuba, and I'm like, I think I'm probably one of the only people in the room who actually understands
Yeah.
what this ksuba means, and
It's
it
taken a
bothers me deeply.
ceremonial, but because it's taken a ceremonial, stance, and it's like, yeah, let's get to the dancing. You know what I mean? So it's like all ceremonial, but it's not.
But
We're
isn't it
not
funny that like people will, before they sign a contract for a car or a
right.
job or a house, they'll want to have it reviewed by a lawyer and want to know what
Mm.
every single tiny clause says. But you're marrying somebody,
Oh my
right?
gosh.
You're
Yeah.
marrying somebody. You don't want to know what your contract says in it?
Oh my
I find that
gosh.
unbelievable. And then when you take, the people who sit and learn, right? The big learners, Talmidei Chachamim, these Bachrim, 21, 22, 18, doesn't matter how old they are, 30, and they're giving their wives a ksuba. Do you know what this means? And what
Wow.
about the women? How do you enter a contract and not read the fine print. You're getting married. This is your life. This is your life.
Totally.
So you got to do it goes back to this prenup discussion is so powerful. It's so powerful because it is the seeds which are going to grow into magnificent trees and bear a lot of great fruit of
Right.
communication between the couple and of having a real bond and a real partnership, and that those brachos under the chuppah, right? Re'im ahuvim, ahava ve'achva ve'shalom ve'reut will be real, right? Will be real.
Wow.
It will be what it means,
Thank
and
you.
not
Thank
just
you
some
so much.
kind of nice ceremonial words. But let's put that
Wow.
into practice. Let's have these discussions. And
I
people who
love
are
that
married, it's
idea.
not too late. You
Love
could
it.
do a post-nup, right? You could say, wait a second, we got to redefine. And I think, and this is something that's a difficult conversation also. Even when we're happily married, every couple of years, I think couples need to sit down and say, okay, where are we holding, right? Where are we holding right now? Am I doing my role? Am I living up to your expectations? And be able to you have to really love somebody and trust somebody to have that conversation with them. And
Yeah.
if you
And
can't
another
have that
partner to
conversation with
listen.
them,
Right. Both sides have to be willing to listen to one another,
right.
right?
And we have to
Right.
be willing to accept, wait a second, like I really thought things were going to be different. Like I really thought you were going to, when you said you're in charge of laundry, I thought that meant folding it and putting it away also, right? I didn't think that you're going to do the laundry and I'm going to come home to like 6 barrels, for me to fold and put away, right?
Wow. Totally so.
So
Thank
those are
you.
things that we just have to have communication about. But when we don't have communication about those things, it's like bankruptcy, right? I have a lot of clients who end up in bankruptcy, right? How does it happen? Really, really, really slowly. A little bill here, a little bill there, and then all of a sudden they turn around, literally, and one day they're bankrupt.
Yep. I've
And
been
that
there.
same thing happens to marriage. Now, sometimes it's unavoidable. If you don't have someone to have a conversation with, you don't have someone to have a conversation with. But
I
if
think
you
that's
do
the
have
big,
someone who maybe you could have a conversation with, or maybe you could learn, that's where we can say, maybe I could learn, right? Maybe I could learn how to put out this tiny little fire before it turns to something that I got to jump out the window for.
correct. Correct. This conversation is so important. I can't thank you enough, Shoshi, for enabling us to understand when marriage feels lifeless, how Torah and halacha offer clarity and compassion. And you're showing us a path of renewal, being able to revive a marriage, whether we're within the marriage or beyond the marriage. And how there's true Emuna really means not just trusting in Hashem. This is what I'm hearing from you, but taking full responsibility as co-creators, co-partners in the universe, to take responsibility and action when you feel that you're enduring a lifeless marriage or a lifeless partnership, right?
Right.
And
That's the concept of Nasa Adam. Hashem says to us, we're gonna work on you together. We're gonna make you into a mensch. And
Amazing. I want to ask just one last point. I know that we don't have a lot more time. I think this is one of the most important questions. And again, I know we're going to have to do part 3, 4, and so on and so forth. But how how do you help individuals refrain from thinking that divorce is a failure? That as though what I invested 20, 35, 40 years of my life. And what piece of advice, how can you reframe a person's mindset for thinking, I gave up, and I'm a failure and I didn't do what Hashem wanted me to. And now I'm going to have to, stand up to that. And how can you help them refrain from looking at divorce as a path to renewal in their avodat Hashem, that there's life after divorce. There's life after a marriage that served its purpose for whatever reason, right? And to go with that through Emuna Shlema.
there's the theory and there's the actual feeling of that. And sometimes they're really far apart. And I think it takes a lot of time. That's for sure. Within the formula of healing from divorce is a lot of time. Um, a client one time told me that after he got divorced, on his anniversary, one of his children called him up and said, "Oh, happy anniversary, Dad. Like, really, we have what, great, what are we going to celebrate? In a very sarcastic and kind of cruel phone call. And he was really down about it. He's like, why would my kid do that? And really, like, how did I waste? And he had been married for a long time. He had been married over 20 years. Definitely well over 20 years. And a lot of kids. I don't remember how many kids there were. There were at least 10 kids. This is like one of my first clients, long time ago. So, and he was like really down about it. He's like, I wasted like 20 plus years of my life. I had these kids, and like, how did I do this to my kids? And I failed my kids. I failed my parents. I failed my grandparents. I failed my society. He also was a Rebbe in yeshiva, and he was really nervous he was going to get fired from his job. He was really, really very upset about it. And I said to him, isn't it interesting that we could ask the same question? Klal Yisrael can ask the same question. Why do we celebrate Shavuos? And Shavuos, Moshe Rabbeinu gave us, through HaKadosh Baruch Hu via Moshe Rabbeinu, gave us the luchos, right? He gave us, we heard the luchos. We heard the Aseret HaDibros. And those luchos were created on Shavuos, right? Hashem created those luchos. He inscribed with them the fire, Matan Torah, Ma'amad Har Sinai. What happened to those luchos? Well, when the writing was still very fresh on the luchos, and we say the luchos is like a wedding, right? Matan Torah is like a wedding. All our minhagim of a wedding come from Matan Torah. The parents walked down the aisle holding candles, right? Because there was Eish at Matan Torah. Everything about our chuppah, the chassan comes out to greet the kala, just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu came out to greet Klal Yisrael. Everything about our weddings is based on Matan Torah. And what happened? Well, if we would say today, if we put it in modern terms today, and I'll keep it, kind of parv, because we might have, I don't know who our audience is, but like, could you imagine if, a chassan and kala are in the cheder yichud, right? And this is actually, I've heard stories like this before. They're in the cheder yichud, and the kala takes out her smartphone and she starts texting, right? She's texting all her friends, and she's taking, a picture of herself and talking and whatever. And the chassan's just kind of sitting there, right? So we did that to Hashem. We did even worse to Hashem, right? We were talking with another guy, okay, in the mashal. So we did the Chet HaEgel. And Moshe Rabbeinu comes down and he breaks those luchos. And we got to get a new luchos, right? And those luchos only came to us, the new luchos came to us on Yom Kippur. So a great question to ask is, why do we celebrate Shavuos? Shavuos was a very unsuccessful marriage, if we want to rate marriage. It lasted 40 days, right? 40 days. Not a lot of time. Imagine if someone would get married today and they would get divorced after 40 days, right? Everybody would like, could I have my gift back, right? Like, that's kind of strange. But we're celebrating Shavuos every year. That is Matan Torah. That is Matan Torah. Because even if the Torah that we received was broken, we still received it. We still got it. There was purpose towards it. And we kept those broken luchos. Those broken luchos were in until the Churban, right? In the Kodesh HaKadoshim, right next to the second luchos. And in fact, the Medrash tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu, Psalecha, it says, when Hashem told him, carve out new luchos, Hashem also told Moshe Rabbeinu, the psolet, all of the leftover pieces from the luchos, those belong to you. You could take the psolet. You could take the remnants, the little pieces. You could take them for yourselves. And Moshe Rabbeinu took those pieces and he formed a ring with them. And he gave it to Tzipporah and he remarried Tzipporah. And when we say, Hare at mikudeshet li, kedat Moshe v'Yisrael, right? We are referencing the psolet, right? The leftover pieces from the luchos, which Moshe fashioned into a ring, which he gave to Tzipporah when he remarried her. He did the mitzvah of machzir et grushato. It's a good thing that Aaron was the Kohen and not Moshe, right? Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to do that. Right. So the bottom line that I'm trying to say, and this is a very deep concept which Rav Hutner speaks about in Pachad Yitzchak regarding Shavuos, and he says a Talmud Chacham, a wise person, sheshachach Talmudo, that forgot all of his teachings, right? He forgot everything. He doesn't remember, he, God forbid, has dementia, Alzheimer's, something like that. Chayiv l'chabdo, are we obligated to respect him? And the Gemara says yes. And Rav Hutner connects that to the same idea of the fetus, which learns kol hatoira kulo in its mother's womb. But then we forget it. So what was the point, right? What
Be
was the
reminded.
point of the fetus learning all that Torah if it's just going to be taken away from it? What was the point of being married for 20, 30, 40 years, 40 days, if it's all just going to be broken? But there was a point. And that's why we celebrate Shavuos. Because sometimes those breaks, those forgotten things, those erased, are something which changes us fundamentally and brings us to our tikkun, to our ya'ad, what we're supposed to do. So those children were supposed to be born. And even if there were no children born, there is something that I am learning and gaining and growing and becoming from being in this relationship. And that's with every relationship we have. But kal v'chomer, a relationship that has a zikah hilchatit, right? A bond, which is actually really what the Gemara is talking about in Maseches Gittin. The Mizbeach cries when bonds are broken, right? Bonds are broken. And crying is a gift, right? Crying is something releasing. Crying, it gives us the ability to express ourselves when words can't express ourselves and to be able to release and move on.
Right.
The
Right. We
bracha.
talk a lot about this. This is what Emuna is about. It's about reclaiming that inner voice, about not storing the pain, the silent scream. Emuna is not about suppressing the soul's voice and the inner cry. It's about taking it out, releasing it out, not allowing it to be stored. So many women, men live in misery in marriage. That misery, that pain is stored in their cells. It ends up brewing into becoming real life emotional and physical illnesses. And we know Torah teaches us that one of the first steps to Geula was Vayitzaku el Hashem, is when you yell out and you say, I can't take it anymore. That's the finding voice of redemption. And Hashem doesn't want us to live in a lifeless situation. I say to, people, I also, mentor people and women and men sometimes come to me and I say, it's not a bchira, it's not a choice to live in a lifeless marriage. That's not a choice. That's not what Hashem signed us,
Right.
to do.
Just like it's not a choice to be ill.
Right, right. We're supposed
Meaning
to
you
do
can
something
get the
about it.
illness, but you don't have to stay there.
Right, you have to fight. Right, you have to fight, and we know the soul is compared to a flame. That's what the Baal Shem Tov teaches us. So if the flame is being smothered, it has to find air in
Right.
order for it, right? And that search to find air is holy. That's part of what it means to fulfill our tikkun. So for us to say, again, I'm going to put myself on the mizbeach, I'm going to burn, in this pain, again, I know that I asked a Rav once, because when women call me and ask me, and they say to me, how do I know it's over? And Rav Pinchas Winston Shlita said to me something so beautiful. He says, tell them that when they feel that they can no longer do their avodat kodesh with a level of like simcha and contentment and fulfillment, and they don't feel that they can grow anymore in the marriage, then they need to question. Again, this is now the time for
Right.
advocacy and mediation and clarity. It's not cut and dry, but you definitely know you're at the point where you're just not going to sit dry,
And
right?
divorce, the Torah gives us divorce. It's a halachic tool to protect a spouse from suffering. An abuse completely nullifies the purpose of marriage, right? So if we go back to that Gemara, right, which, the altar weeps, and that's the tragedy which the altar is weeping over, is the tragedy when divorce comes out of selfishness. When divorce is the remedy for injustice, however, it restores a person's dignity. It doesn't betray it. That's not the betrayal, right? That's not what the altar is crying for. So the altar weeps, right? When when the covenant is broken by treachery, by adultery, infidelity, right? It's not demanding the perpetuation of suffering.
Wow. Wow. I have to tell you, this is such a rich, important, eye-opening conversation that needs to happen. That was one of the main feedbacks that I got. and I know you've gotten your feedback, was to open up our eyes, to show us the halacha clarity and compassion that Torah offers us in terms of what it means to live in a marriage that should be fruitful. And it says, "Pu ubu." You're supposed to be fruitful. You're supposed to multiply, not just children, but you yourself. You're supposed to feel yourself blossoming and becoming, and so many women, I hate to say, I can only speak for women because that's where most of my mentorship comes to, feel like the Torah almost traps them. Again, I know it's a subject for
Right.
another.
The Torah doesn't trap them. The abuse of the Torah traps them,
Oh, I
right?
like that's so
The
important to understand.
using statements like Rebbe Lazar's statement to say to people you shouldn't get divorced. Um,
Right.
the severe discrimination against divorced people. Instead of having compassion for someone who's divorced, the world kind of becomes their um, the ulama shiput, the courtroom, okay, where everybody, not everybody, okay, but they're very judged, right? I had a woman call me and she's like, I really need to get divorced. She's in divorce proceedings already. Do you think I should postpone my divorce till after my children are accepted into school? I said, Ma kesher. She goes, well, they're not going to accept, no good school is going to accept my children. Um, so when you have things like that's a certain discrimination against divorced people. A lot of assumptions are made, right, regarding divorced people, and that's where we can be compassionate. Compassionate means maybe I should just not judge and mind my own business, right?
My
Or
gosh, you
just
can't.
offer, ask, how can I help? Instead of, you know, I, when I got divorced, somebody said to me, and it was a relative, okay, a relative said to me, you really should stop using disposable plates because you're giving your children a message that everything in life is just disposable, like your marriage, right? So that's like things like that when people say things, and I have like lists of like 101 things that people said, which are stupid. So thank God I can just laugh about it because I think it's funny. Um, but not everybody thinks it's funny. To some people, that would be like traumatizing, okay? And understandably so. So we have to be sensitive. We have to assume we don't know. And we have to assume that also we have no need to know. It's none of our business. I got a WhatsApp message a few months ago from a relative of a relative, right, who heard that I'm representing her friend's ex, soon to be ex, with a whole long message of, do I know what a horrible thing I'm doing? And there was actually the week of Parshas Tazria Mitzorah. So I wrote back to her and said, why are you getting involved in machlokas? Why are you listening to Lashon Hara? The week of Tazria Mitzorah, you have no idea what you're talking about. You shouldn't have any idea what you're talking about. Just ask how you can help. And, do you need money? Do you need an invitation for Shabbos? That's it. Stay out of it. Like, but people, we're curious. We're curious, so we like to feel good about ourselves. We have a Yetzer Hara that if someone else is in a worse situation than I am, then great. Or we want to be saviors sometime and figure it out, and we want justice because we have some justice, we have some
Yes.
unfinished business in our own lives that we feel we're gonna, live vicariously through this. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. We need to check ourselves and say, wait, how can I actually really be helpful in this situation?
Right.
How can I really be helpful in this
And
situation?
don't judge a person until you're not in their place. Isn't that like that's
Right.
A1 of Torah, right? Wow, wow, wow. This has been beyond. Thank you so much for your wisdom, for your compassion, your clarity. You know, the idea that you've reminded us that Hashem's Torah was not meant to trap us, but to really free us and to give us dignity, and to do it in a dignified way, and to restore life to our souls that are in pain. I can't thank you enough. And to our listeners, I want to just send the message that if your marriage is feeling heavy, confusing, lifeless, remember you're not alone. You have Shoshi Goldstein Nissenbaum. You have so many, avenues to receive clarity. And it's Emuna is not about staying silent. It's not about just sucking it in. It's about trusting that Hashem has a plan for you and that there is a plan that is channeled for you, and He wants you to live a truly fruitful, healing life. Right? Is that a good summary of it, of our talk today?
I think that's a great summary of it. And I mean, I, as a Palestine, will never tell anybody what to do, right? I don't tell people to get divorced, not to get divorced. Um, by me, you order pizza, you get pizza. You order sushi, you get sushi. Um, but definitely in terms of chizuk, of when someone has made that decision that, yes, I need to get divorced, that there
Thank you
are
so much. That is
ways.
so important. You have really brought so much light, and if this subject and this episode touched you, please share it with someone who today needs light and strength and clarity and validation. And together we're going to spread the word of, Torah's message of healing and making sacred choices. So thank you once again, Shoshi Goldstein Nissenbaum, and thank you. And how can people reach out to you? Please make sure that you tell us here. How can they reach out to you, Shoshi?
They could drop me an email. We could put it in the description.
Okay. And what's your website?
SGN,
Okay, go
S,
ahead. Say
SGN@toenet.com. And that's my
amazing.
website also, toenet.com, where I have a lot of information, other podcasts, professionals about the
Amazing.
world of divorce, especially parental alienation.
Oh my gosh. That's, you know what? We're going to talk about that as well. We're going to do part 3 and 4, and stay tuned. And thank you everyone for listening. Once again, I'm Maurita, the writer for OrTalk, and I'm wishing you a day filled with courage, light, and healing. Thank you so much. Looking forward to the next time.